Right, 6:30, so we'll start this licensing committee meeting with, first of all, the usual fire evacuation proceedings. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exits are located at the rear and side of this room. Go down the stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. Next, to note that the open proceedings of this meeting are webcast. To receive apologies for absence, I have received none, and I think probably Councillor Ruffell has been delayed. I'm sure he'll be here soon. No resignations and replacements. Any declarations of conflicts of interest? No. I have no urgent items. So the first thing then to do is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of November 2012, which can be found at paper A. Are we agreed on those? Yeah, thank you. Member and public participation upon issues contained within the agenda. I've got two speakers, Mr. Ketteringham and Mr. Dainty, and I'll call you forward soon. Okay. No referral from other committees, council or cabinet, and no portfolio holder. So we go on to the main business of the agenda, starting with paper B, found at page 6 of 71, Hackney Carriage Fare Increase Request. Andrew.
Thank you. This paper is to enable members to consider the fare increase request submitted by the Hackney Carriage Federation, as can be seen at Appendix 2. The last fare increase became effective in February of last year. It was previously agreed that officers would liaise with the Federation to review Hackney carriage fares on an annual basis. Officers met with the Federation to discuss this fare increase. Following that meeting, the Federation consulted with their members and held a vote to determine the proposed increase request. The 3 pence per litre rise in fuel duty, as detailed within the paper, that was initially planned by central government to come into effect this month, was scrapped. It was widely reported on the news last week, though, that there could be a similar rise in fuel prices, with the rise of wholesale costs of fuel rising being passed on to motorists. Officers feel that the standard of Hackney carriages in the borough is exceptionally high, and that the escalating overheads which proprietors are subjected to, as detailed in paragraph 4 of this report, make the request a reasonable request. Summary of the fare increase is detailed within paragraph 5.3, which is in short to increase the initial flag fare by 20 pence during normal tariff working periods, 30 pence at the 50% surcharge working periods, and 40% at the 100% surcharge periods. Officers recommend that the fare increase be approved and that liaison continue with the Federation to consider annual fare increases. Thank you.
Did you understand all that? Does anybody at this stage have any questions to ask the officer? Yes, Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Chair. On the question of the average price of diesel, it's clear that it is, am I reading this right? It's cheaper this year than it was last year, locally. I think last year was 143.2 pence, and now it's 142 pence. I thought diesel had gone up. Sorry, I've got it on there.
Yeah, your understanding is correct. According to the AA website, those prices are accurate. It has been widely reported that there is due to be a fuel increase. But that aside, we think that the other overheads that proprietors are subjected to still show an overall rise in overheads. So this makes it a reasonable request. But yeah, according to the AA, the fuel price has gone ever so slightly down.
Thank you very much. So you're happy, you understand the nature of the fare rise. Okay, thank you. Can I call on our speakers to come forward now? I don't know who wants to come first. Mr. Ketteringham, thank you. You have as long as you like.
Good evening, councillors. Just referring to the councillor about the the fuel going down slightly. Yeah, the diesel going down slightly. As year to year, when you look at month to month, it may seem that it's gone down, but during the year, as you can see with some of the paperwork, it actually spikes up and down and up and down. So although it comes down at tuppence less or a penny less than it was last year, overall during the year it's gone up and down. So that really doesn't make a huge difference. But like Andy was saying, the cost of everything again has gone up an awful lot. And I think 20 pence is not an unreasonable amount to ask. But also, I'd like to point out, when we had the snow last week, all the Hackney carriage drivers were charging exactly the same amount, because obviously we can't charge any more, whereas it was quite obvious that the private hire firms were charging customers time and a half up till midnight and double time after midnight. And they're allowed to do that, because if they choose to charge that, they have to inform the customers, whereas we were just charging the same amount, whereas their overheads are a lot less than what we have to deal with, yet everything else is still going up. So I personally think it's a reasonable amount to ask for 20 pence on each fare.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Ketteringham? Yes, Councillor Egan.
I take your point about the diesel. Yeah, ours business at the moment is it declined over the last year? I'm saying, what would be the effect of a price increase? Would it decrease trade? Hang on, if I can get this off, it'll be all right.
I don't think it has decreased, or if it has, it's only a little amount. And since the last fare increase came in February last year, we haven't noticed a huge difference in the amount of trade we're getting. And we still obviously get our regular customers. And if anything, we find that people seem to use us a little bit more, because a lot of them have had bad experiences in minicabs, whereas they like the fact they get in a taxi, the meter goes on, they get to where they're going, it stops, and they know exactly what they're paying.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just looking at the opening comments in your Appendix 2, your opening statement is following the continuing rise in the price of fuel and the cost of living regarding utilities and food costs. You would like to apply for a variation in your fares. I mean, that is clearly a state of affairs that applies to everybody, whether they are your fare-paying passengers or not. And I just wonder what your thoughts are, how that gives you some kind of advantage, if you like, over others who aren't in position to make a bid for an increase in their income to offset the experience that everybody's having.
It's a difficult one to answer that. I think I can understand. Yeah, everybody, their cost of living is going up, but when it comes to us with running a business, obviously our insurance increases are a lot more than what would be the general person running a car. Obviously, we've got the same overheads, be it with normal food costs, electricity and gas and things like that, but I think it partly comes down to the fact that the type of vehicles we're using, because we're having to use these specially built vehicles. It's as if the parts seem to go up a little bit more than what they would on, say, a normal, be it a Ford Mondeo or a Vauxhall or something like that. If you go to LTI for their parts, they seem to be going up a lot more than what they would, say, on a normal Peugeot car. So it's I can understand where you're coming from, but our overheads, we have more overheads than what, say, a normal person would with running a normal family car, if you understand what I'm saying. Yeah Okay.
Questions? Could I just ask one? I noticed that on the figures for last year and for this year, the AA RPI for motor vehicles, presumably that's the one that you would go by most, because that will take into account every parameter, that, you know, fuel, etc., insurance. It was 8.7 last time percent, only 2 to 2.5 this time. So, I mean, obviously, I also understand that you're asking for less this time, so there's no problem with that. Is that the figure that you're generally using, that 2 to 2.5% increase? That is your yardstick?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, that is the retail price index with the A is the one we're using, yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Dainty, do you want to come and speak now? Thank you.
Good evening. Just moving on, looking at the prices of running the vehicles that we've got. I'm looking here at cost index April 2010 for an LTI taxi. These are from the London Transport figures. So these are on the website, printed by London Transport. Okay, so they identify the cost involved in running a TX, which is the type of vehicle. Well, the majority still. We do have Peugeots. We have a few Peugeots. Now, this is going back to 2010. We're looking at something like 211 pence, or £2.11 and a half pence per mile. Okay, now if we look at our report, I believe on the first 5 miles we're running at something like about 150, and then we're running at £2. So by my calculations, we're subsidising something like 60 pence. We're not achieving what the policy of this council is in terms of our running costs. In effect, you could argue the fact that we're never going to get there, because the policy is such that it takes us more and more and more and more to run. Now, this is 210. They're now saying that the next figure is 211, we're running about 1.9%, so that puts us up to 215, and we're still nowhere near. Now, we have a policy here, a very good policy, fine, but it needs to be paid for. Now, if the council are not happy to pay for it, then maybe they need to look at the policy. Personally, I would prefer that we moved away from having to come here. We have to come here because the council say, or the council has discretionary powers to enable them to set the fares. I'm not sure how that can be achieved when they have no real insight as to what the running costs are. We feel that we should be able to set our own fares and deal with our own in-house business. There is no other business in this borough that the council dictates to what the costs are or how the costs are. We can't move forward with people continually ask or saying to us, well, you know, how do you justify this, how do you justify that? That's fair, but to have an insight to what we're looking at might make the question more reasonable. Now, I don't think that a lot of people around here have an insight to what these vehicles are costing us to run. Now, maybe we should be looking at us self-regulating, i.e. that we keep the regulations in terms of the meter, we keep the regulations in terms of the fares, but we don't have this input. The last year we came here, we had 3 letters to this committee, none of which were germane or relevant to the fare increase. They were talking about loss of tokens, they were talking about loss of buses. We even had a council that went to press over the situation. Again, not understanding what the situation was. We do sympathise with people that have lost means of getting to and from. That shouldn't impact upon us in running our business at the end of the day. You know, so personally, I would like to see we move forward to maybe having a paper put before this committee that looks at the question that we should be self-regulating, because we are the people that know how to run our business the most, and that's enough. You know, so I think that's about it, really.
Very much. Would anybody like to ask any questions of Mr. Dainty? Nobody wants to come back at that. Okay, thank you. Well, actually, Mr. Dainty, could you just come forward? Sorry, I've just thought of one I want to ask myself. I'm sorry, since no one else has one. We'll obviously discuss what you've proposed, but just obviously recognise that we do have high standards in this borough, which is welcomed, and every taxi has to have accommodation for wheelchairs. I have had one person from the public ask me how many of your taxis can accommodate the battery-operated larger wheelchairs. I'm assuming that the ordinary LTI ones don't.
The situation is it's not a one-size-fits-all. Clearly the aperture makes a difference. Clearly the back seat makes a difference. You can only, to be honest, if I kind of guess if I was a disabled person, I'd be kind of insulted slightly by some of the vehicles that are on the market, because they don't actually accommodate or look to accommodate the changes in wheelchairs, if you like, i.e. the types of motorised wheelchairs we have now, people sit on them, people ride them, all these styles. There are some manufacturers that are looking at it, but at the moment, I guess they look at their costs and they look at what they can provide that makes it the most cost effective for them, I guess. The Peugeots are better. The Peugeots can accommodate some that are bigger than the LTI because they have an adjustable back seat. The seat moves back, but it doesn't accommodate all. So we have other issues about loading people on in terms of the actual ramp, which will only take a certain amount of weight. Also, you then start looking at situations of people dismounting, mounting. It becomes a complete minefield, you know. And I don't know that we'll ever achieve a one-fits-all vehicle. I'm not sure that we could actually. I don't think we could actually finance it in terms of. We were talking about fares tonight. If you look at the cost of a vehicle to accommodate everybody, would we then be able to get a return back that would make that vehicle viable? I don't know. I doubt it very much. I doubt it very much because people will only pay. Listen to the comments tonight. You know, people only pay a certain amount for a taxi journey, what they perceive to be a taxi journey. We know what is in the taxi journey, i.e. to get to the point that the taxi picks the person up. It's not just about the journey on the meter. You know, it's about the development, it's about us, it's about our training, it's about every other aspect. In this borough, we don't look into it like they do in other areas. If you look at the LTI stuff and taxis for London, it's really detailed. They look at every aspect. You know, we're looking at earning £19,000 or whatever, you know, it's minimum wage. But going back to your question, sorry, yeah, we don't have a one-size-fits-all. No, we don't.
Thank you. And don't go yet because Councillor Reagan's thought of something now. Thank you.
Going back to your point about setting your own fares, I mean, bear in mind that I think they are quite high as a taxi user. I think from the station to where I live, it's £687, so it would go up, what, 40 pence, 20 pence if you get your increase. I'm saying, but if you go back to the issue of what you want, is to regulate yourselves, do you think that would be high? It certainly wouldn't be low, would it? So, yeah, so I'm always forgetting.
No, I don't think it would because when you hear around here, you talk about the free market, you talk about market, you talk about the free market and market regulation. We're not idiots. We know what the fares are. We know what people are prepared or prepared not to pay. Where we have an issue is the realisation of what it's costing to run this high quality standard of vehicles. If we continue to do that, I mean, you say to your home, now, we take it in your home. Now, if we're talking about £2.10, let's make it easy, as a running cost. Now, you're saying to me that out to your house is £7.40? Yeah, okay. Right, okay. So we're talking what, 2 and a bit miles? So we're talking about what, 4 or 5, maybe close to £6 of that journey, maybe 5 and a bit pounds of that journey is running costs. So what am I making on a journey like that? Then I'm going back empty. So what am I making going back? Because I'm not going to pick a fare up going back. So if I don't pick a fare up going back, yeah, if I pick a fare up going back, wow, I'm in for that. That's brilliant. But we don't have that situation here, which is why we have a problem, you know, with this, because we are looking at running from the rank to point A and from point A back to the rank. We very seldom get return fares. If we got them, we would be fine. We probably wouldn't even be in here asking for an increase. You know, we do get the odd. The last survey that was done here, not the one that was kicked out, but the one before that, said that we get about 2% hail. Now, I would think that that's an overestimation. I would think if we're lucky to get 0.5%. I don't get a hail down probably, I don't know, once a month if I get one at all. In fact, I have people that are on the crossing who see me. I go onto the rank, they then walk up from the crossing and then get into the vehicle. How does that work? I don't know. So it's more than just going £7.40. The point I was making, Councillor, it's more than £7.40. It's going to your house. To get to your house for £7.40, there's a lot more involved in the cost. And we don't make £7.40 out of that fare.
I take that point. I'm just trying to say, if you set your own fares, you'd have to set it to the market, wouldn't you? It's sort of better off without the microphone.
We would, but we would be setting the fares that would meet our costs. tonight, you could argue this down, and we'd go away from here tonight, and we'd have nothing. Let's take last year. We didn't get our increase for 3 months. Richard worked out that it cost us roughly £700 because it was over Christmas. That's income we will never get back. You know, it's gone. Now, if you were in a job and I said to you, I'm going to give you a rise, but I'm not going to pay you till January, you should have got an extra 700 quid, but I ain't going to give that to you now because it wasn't there in January. You know, we had an argument, well, or something, you know, but we're not going to pay that to you now. That's income we've lost. That's projected income for our business. You know, what we have to remember, this is a business. We project our costs. You know, we're not people that just turn up on the rent. We are businessmen, like any other business. You know, and that's what we're saying. If we're looking to do it, we're keeping the regulations. We keep the meter, everything like that, exactly the same. It's just that we are the people that do it, not the public, or not. And even I wouldn't mind if the letters that we got were germane. They weren't. They weren't even vaguely close to the point. And we had to wait 3 months to find that out. No, it's not a modern world. You know, we need to accept that we are business people.
Thank you. No, it's good to hear from you. Thank you very much. Okay. Would anybody like to make any comments? Yes, Councillor Mrs. Burgess.
Thank you. I'd just like to make sure it's put on record that the people of Basingstoke thoroughly appreciated the way that these gentlemen actually worked during the snow weather. There were always cabs on the rank when you wanted one. They did a thoroughly good job, and I just want it put on record. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. We'll minute that if that's okay. Right, anybody else? Yes? Okay, Councillor Frankham first.
Okay, it's a very small increase, and I haven't got a problem with that. What I have got a problem with, yet again, it's at the front end. So someone on the 1 mile journey has got over 4% increase, whereas someone on a 10-mile journey is less than a % increase. So I'm opposed to it because of the fact that the short journeys, before the increase can come in, this borough on the chart on page 33 was already the dearest for a 1 mile journey. Once you go to further down, we start going into mid-table by 10 miles, and if you go for a 5 mile journey, we're one of the lowest. But for people with a short journey, and the people on short journeys tend to be less able, that's why they need to use a taxi, and we're punishing them. So I'm opposed to just a 20p up front. So I don't know if I'm going to vote against it or abstain yet. But I'm not against the increase. I'm just the fact it's at the front end. So people's short journeys have got the biggest increase yet again. They seem to happen every year.
I suppose the answer is that the running costs are just the same for the short journeys as the long journeys, and yeah. Councillor Hood.
Thank you. I think two drivers put forward a very sound case. But nevertheless, although it doesn't seem a great increase, 20 pence, I keep thinking about the public out there. People who have started to struggle with their income. Companies putting blockage on salary increases, frozen. And I think about the perception that we could be seen to say, all right, go ahead with the taxi drivers. I've got grave concerns. I know they're running a business. They need to make sure that business is viable. But then in the ward that I represent, there's a lot of people there who are struggling really, and even the additional 20 pence would find a bit hard. So I'm not sure if I could support this one.
Just make it clear also that whatever we do vote for today will go up for consultation, so the public will have a chance to have their say, and then it may come back. Anybody else? Councillor Barnes.
Probably not at all relevant, but I'm interested to know if the price of diesel suddenly reduced, would they reduce the fares? Possibly not. Huh?
Okay, would you like to just come back so that we can hear you on the webcast and put your microphone on?
Just for
Thank
your
you.
particular comment, in London, they have a multiplier. They have 40p. After diesel prices move up by a certain amount, they're allowed to charge 40p. When it drops down below that, it comes off. So in answer to your question, yes, it could be done.
Thank you. Would anybody else? Yes, Councillor Goodson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I think we all need to accept that the
official rate of inflation doesn't in any way always reflect exactly the sort of increases that a lot of people are suffering. You know, we're talking about a 4% increase here in the fare. I'm sure that many of these gentlemen's costs in running their businesses, apart from the fuel, are well ahead of the normal rate of inflation. So I don't have any problem myself with this increase and would be willing to support it. Thank you.
Any comments from any other councillors? No? So we might have to put this to a vote then, because I'm not quite sure which way you're going to go. My own view, I have to say, is that looking at the AA RPI increase this year is between 2 and 2.5%, and a percentaged out the increase on the table on page 9 of 71, and that seems to be roughly in line with that. So to me, it doesn't seem unreasonable. Okay. Oh, Councillor Godison.
No, just for saying I'm happy to propose that we accept this recommendation.
Okay, let's go to the vote. Then we've got a propose and a seconder to accept the recommendation on the report paper. All those in favour? And against? It goes to the casting vote. Okay, well, we will accept that, but of course it will be going up for consultation, and if there are any people who object to it, it will be coming back to this committee. Thank you. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Right, we now move on to paper C on page 35 of 71. Approval of our sex establishment licensing policy following consultation. Over to you, Linda.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope to be brief on this. Members will recall that we've been through to this committee on several occasions with a sex establishment policy and a revised sex establishment policy, and it was at last March's committee that it was agreed that to approve a policy to go out for consultation. There was some delay before it went out due to other work commitments, but it did go out for consultation between November and January starting in 2012. In summary, there's a list of all the consultees that are at the back of this report. We had one response, which was from a councillor, which Councillor Mrs Taylor did reply to, really just asking the question about the zero limit across the borough. But obviously we'd been through that at previous licensing committees and explained the legalities and the obviously obtaining council's opinion on that. So I have made no changes to the licensing policy or conditions that were brought to this committee last March, because there were no further comments arising out of the consultation. So it's just really to recommend that we now adopt this policy, approve this policy to be referred to full council for adoption. Thank you.
Right, do we have any questions, first of all, to Linda? Of course, one or two of you weren't here last year when we agreed this policy. Anybody want to ask any questions? No? Yes, Councillor? Yes, you may. Okay, we'll move on to comments. Councillor Taylor, yes.
I'd just like to compliment the officers on the quality of the report. I think it's a really good piece of work, and I think it covers and captures everything we've said over a long period of time. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Barnes.
I'd like to ask, and it's probably irrelevant, the shop in town called Ann Summers, is that a sex shop or sex establishment? What sort of shop is that? Is it just a shop?
We have had this question raised before. Ann Summers has been through the courts where it's been challenged as to whether it's a sex shop or not. It doesn't meet the criteria for a sex shop, so no, it's not.
Sorry.
About paragraph 9.3, there seems to be, it says error. Presumably that's been picked up.
Yes, we have two formatting errors where it's come up on the printed copy, but it doesn't show up on the electronic copy. We got it on the index as well, and we couldn't see it until it was printed, and we've asked IT to look into it to remove that reference. It's an error to do with the formatting of the document. It's a bit over my head when it comes to IT. Yes, there's two in there.
Thank you. Yes, we've got one to move it. Seconded. All in agreement? Thank you. That's fine. That's duly passed, and we now have our sex establishment policy to go to council. One more item. Hold on, Councillor Barnes. Just to note, there was one matter dealt with by subcommittee in January. You've got the papers at the back, and that was the application by Wonderland to extend its hours of sale of alcohol, and that was duly granted. So Fridays and Saturdays to 4 a.m. with closing time at 4:30. That was granted with 2 conditions. Okay, everyone noted. Thank you. I think I can declare the meeting over at 7 o'clock.